Materialism and non-dualism, or consciousness-only model, use the word consciousness slightly different. And if we use the definition of consciousness set by materialism, we might misunderstand non-dualism before we've even had a chance to evaluate it. So join me in this episode and let's see if we can add some clarity. So what is consciousness? Well, ultimately, it's just a word. What's interesting is what it is pointing to. And oftentimes, or not often, but it's not unusual that we get caught in discussion about the absolute definition of consciousness, which one is the correct one. And that has its time and place, but I find it much more interesting that in the realm of this conversation, when you and I have an interaction, what are we trying to point to? For me, that's more interesting than the correct definition. So I wanted to take a moment or a video and emphasize what is meant with consciousness in this context. What am I trying to point to when I share my thoughts and my understandings and my reflections? And before I do that, I would like to back up a little bit because I'm from Sweden. I'm brought up in the Western society, and that is founded on materialism, the belief that consciousness is kind of a byproduct of this body. When matter out in the world becomes complex enough, such as our nervous system, then consciousness pops up out of that. And we easily take that for truth, as though that's the only valid model that can explain what we see out in the world. But I'm here to challenge that. And maybe you're already on board, or maybe you're just curious about that idea. But that's kind of the foundation we have of consciousness, and that has implications, because that means that if consciousness is created by my brain, then I have a local consciousness inside of me, and you have a local consciousness inside of you. And if we have that view, and then we define consciousness based on that, it drags with it limitations that isn't necessarily belonging to the word consciousness, which, for instance, means that your consciousness and my consciousness, as though there are multiple consciousnesses and that they're local, and that consciousness only applies to my inner world. And that's all valid when we talk in the context of materialism. But if we want to understand other models of reality that could also explain how this world appears, how we as humans can move in it, how to understand science. And one of those models is the consciousness-only model, or non-dualism. And that model suggests consciousness to be understood in a different way. And whether we believe that's the most plausible explanation of reality, well, that's secondary. First, we need to understand what's suggested in a model, and then we can decide for ourselves whether we believe that it's plausible or not. And consciousness-only model, or non-dualism, suggests that there is only one consciousness. The whole universe is one consciousness. That means that the consciousness doesn't pop up from my body. It is not localized within my mind. So we cannot use the materialistic way of looking at consciousness, and this is a difficult one because this usually goes so deep. So what does non-dualism mean with consciousness? Well, what's being pointed at? Well, if we go all the way back, it is just the ability to be aware, the capacity to notice. It doesn't even have to be an object that is noticing, just this activity of noticing. So basically you remove what is being noticed and you remove who is noticing. Just like the activity of noticing. And this it shares with, this is we're used to. Consciousness is the ability to notice. But the added on understanding of consciousness that comes from materialism, that comes from consciousness coming from our brains, we kind of have to remove those limitations on our understanding of consciousness if we want to understand non-dualism. So consciousness, from a non-dual perspective, is the ability to notice. And this ability to notice, I guess we could think of it as a field. It isn't limited to a field, but it's hard to think of nothing. So let's think of it as a field capable of noticing. And this field can wrinkle itself into different experiences, you could say. So when it localizes into my mind and my body, just as it's localized to your mind and your body, so there is a uniqueness to you, which is the universal consciousness has folded itself into you, as it has with me as well. And within this localization, there are thoughts, there are emotions, there are memories, and other things that we associate with our inner world, so to speak. And this we're used to. We are used to consciousness having things pop up into them. That's not really a foreign or a new way for us to think. But if we limit it to that, then it's hard to understand non-dualism, because we also have to invite the perspective that consciousness can also appear as sense perceptions. And by sense perceptions in this, or I always mean that, by sense perception, it's how we sense the world. All of these ways we can interact with it, which is touch, it's smell, it's hearing. What else are they? Oh, you know this as well as I do. Taste. I forgot which one I didn't mention, but anything that picks up the outer world. And that means that consciousness can also fold itself into sense perceptions. So now we have thoughts, emotions, and sense perceptions. And actually, when we look at our experience, the only way I get any sense of interaction with the outer world, such as this couch, this photo frame or painting, it is actually, this painting, is through experiences. I cannot interact with it directly. I can touch it, and that is the experience of sense perception, and I can look at it, and that's the experience of sight. And this is where it becomes interesting, because the experience of sight does appear in consciousness. And this is not something I wish for you to believe in. It's an invitation to explore for yourself. I can't hear the painting now, but let's do sound, because that's usually one of the easier ones. Does that appear within your consciousness? We usually sometimes think that the sound appears out there, but that's like that's the next level. We can explore if the experience of sound, is it happening as a feeling of like within my inner world? And I have a whole episode if you want to explore those things. But for now, I'm just going to leave it like that. So non-dualism suggests that all our sense perceptions happens within our localization. So in that sense, consciousness, as we're used to, appears as thoughts, emotions, memories, and all the rest, but it also appears as the outer world. It appears as the outer world through our sense perceptions. And one of the like little things we have to let go of in order to understand non-dualism is that we usually believe that since I can hear something, or since I can look at the painting, it is caused by a solid object out there. My seeing this thing is caused by matter, not by consciousness itself, even though my only experience with this painting is sense perceptions, which happens inside of consciousness. There is this almost an instant extrapolation that means that it's caused by solid matter. And this isn't even discussing whether it is. It's just that we leave a gap here. We have sense perceptions, and then that possibly could be caused by an outside object, but the perceptions themselves don't necessarily indicate an object out there. And I think this is the key thing to understand what's suggested with non-dualism. It doesn't deny the perceptions happening with the painting. It just suggests that it's not caused by a solid matter painting. So consciousness can appear as an outer world by and by being experiences. And the way we understand that is to allow for consciousness to not only be, or the definition of consciousness to not only be our thoughts and memories and emotions. Because if we hold on to this definition of consciousness, that's kind of indicated by materialism, we will go off. We won't understand what's suggested with non-dualism. Yes. Because I personally believe that non-dualism is the most plausible explanation of reality. But I have no interest of forcing that belief on anyone. But it breaks my heart when people discard non-dualism before they fully understood what's implied. And that I would like to change. I want people to understand enough so they can make decisions for themselves. Yes. And removing our old definition of consciousness or our old limitations on consciousness is one way to do that. Yes. And also, if you're new to my channel, maybe I should introduce myself. My name is Josephine, and I love sharing these reflections and deep dives into consciousness and what implications it has for our lives, how we define reality or how we understand reality. It has implications for how we relate to others, how we see life and death, and what's meaningful for us. Yeah, so warmly welcome to my channel. And if you're a regular viewer, then I am glad to have you back. And as always, your reflections, your comments, your thoughts, warmly welcome to share in the comment section. Yeah, I hope to see you next time, my friend.